Matt, hey, just to kind of start off, just kind of your general expectation about how the season's going to break down. Do you anticipate playing non-conference play and then a full Big Ten schedule? Do you have any sort of sense at this point?
Yeah, we're trying to kind of get things lined up right now. So I think we're past guesswork. Whether we play 20 conference games or we play more than that. So like a lot of it's speculation at this point. Trying to get everybody set in terms of like your MTEs, if it got affected by the date, the start date, everybody kind of figuring out when they're going to play the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Does it stay or do they move that? So I think once you can kind of get a couple things concrete, now you can move in the direction of what you want to do with the rest of your non-conference stuff. And a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of it can get determined for you. If somebody's not going to play or they don't want to play or they can't play or, there's just so much uncertainty and in each state, in each school, there's a lot of similarities in their protocol, but there are different restrictions across the board.
You would like to play non-conference play, right?
You'd like to play your whole schedule.
Yeah.
But you can't do that. So, yeah, just trying to get in as many quality games as you can get in while, keeping everything above board in terms of health and safety and the testing. And, I think that's still going to be a lot of change within the testing. I think that's going to continue to improve. And so I think that's great. But, can you participate in games with other teams out of your conference that aren't testing the same way that you are? I think there has to be a consistent line there. And obviously we're waiting for that guidance. So we know what we can and can't do.
All right. Is the 27 game limit a hard number, or is there an exception in place for MTEs if they're played?
Yeah, it's a 25 plus 2, or it's a 24 plus 3, or it's a 25 hard number if you don't have an MTE.
I'm good. If someone else wants to.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Just kind of, is your plan right now still to play in the Cancun Challenge in Florida? Or
yeah.
That's being worked out?
Yeah, we like to. We moved the date to 25 and 26, and you can't you can't speak for them, even though they've said that we still have plans to do it. But you also can't speak for the other teams in it. So that's kind of the uncertainty for, you can talk to the event organizer and get set, but you want to make sure all the other teams are in there. And I think you'll see, a little bit of change there across the board in some of those MTEs. You'll have some people dropping out, but you also have some people, wanting to jump in. And, maybe some 2-team MTEs that, we're playing 2 games there, but there's a possibility we could play 3. You're a long way away. Might not be the same teams. It might be the same teams. So even though there's 4 teams that are in our side of it, we were only going to play 2 teams in Florida, and that could get moved to 3 or it could stay the same. There's just a lot of fluctuation right now.
What is your preference when it comes to the conference season? Would you prefer to stay at 20, or would you like to see it increase a little bit?
I'd like to play all of our games, however we can get to that. I really don't have a preference as long as we can play a season and get to the NCAA tournament. Whatever that answer is, I don't have that answer, but I think you feel more comfortable within protocols with your conference, but then you have to be able to take your protocols and say, how do we manage a schedule and how do we put this together, knowing there's going to be some times where individual players are going to have to sit out, or you're going to have to suspend certain games while people are in quarantine. So you have to really get out in front of things and just think and troubleshoot all the possibilities that could happen, and then try to prepare and plan for it to the best of your ability. So anything that I would want to do really doesn't matter. I think trying to get a logical approach and the best approach, and to have some pockets of schedule in there that, especially in February, that doesn't have games. I think having fewer games in February makes a lot of sense. More games in December, more games in January, because then if things happen, as the season progresses towards your conference tournament, now you have, those pockets of your schedule where now you can, go back and play games and do different things. But I think it's going to be different for everybody. If you're a team that has your full roster and, you stay COVID free from the first game all the way to the last game, I think that's great. I think we'll have teams that do that, but I also think we'll have a lot of, differences across the board. And I think, our best example is probably, Major League Baseball. They had a couple teams that had to have stoppages and, a couple other teams that had individual games. And the one thing that they kept doing was they kept going. I think that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to keep going. It's not going to be fair across the board. It's going to be one of those things where you try to make it fair, but as everything unfolds, and you're going to have a lot of, different plays out there.
Purdue's been mentioned as a possible team in a bubble situation. Is that something you're interested in doing, going somewhere and playing?
Sure. If that's the best thing for us after some things get set, yeah. If that's what we have to do, we'll do that. But it's not something that we're talking to people, but it's not something that we have anywhere close to, to being final.
Right. You were on all the committees that kind of puts these recommendations forward to the NCAA.
Right.
Just kind of summarize that process and, how you guys arrived where you are today, and just kind of walk us through a little bit of how some of those things were decided.
Yeah, well, trying to get, your practice, everybody's in a different, situation. And the one thing that we want to make sure of is the conditioning, and really, not being slow with that, but also being understandable that these guys didn't have the same summer. And so you just don't want to throw a lot at them right away. You want to be able to work your way up. So adding those extra hours starting Monday, I think will really help, getting closer to the start of practice, which is October 14th. So I think that was really good. And obviously, when we get to November 25th, when they voted on that, which I'm not on that committee, I'm on the committee to recommend, but I'm not on the committee to actually vote for that. So when it got to November 25th, obviously with our rules, we just worked back, those 42 days, and that's where you get to October 14th. And then we practice 30 out of the next 42 days to get to there. So there was a lot of talk, obviously, about the date. November 25th is the date, really, because I think, in the high 70s percentage wise, I think it was 77%, if I'm not mistaken, schools are out at that time. So, fewer students once we start our season was one of the reasons why that got put up there. And obviously the 23rd was talked about a lot, and that got, pushed back just because what's the difference really? We do have other sports that are participating in the fall and schools in, so you have to put that in perspective. But there's a lot of games, MTEs especially, that start in those time periods. And so we talked about the 23rd some, and then we obviously voted on the 21st, or recommended on the 21st to the D1 Council. And then they decided on November 25th. But we just felt that if you're going to move it back 2 days, why not move it back 4 days, since we don't go to school on Sunday and Saturday. And but that's, there's a lot of things that go into it. There's, football's, being played on those weekends, that Saturday and Sunday. There's a lot of moving parts right there. But obviously, like I said, I'm not in that room when they vote on it. And, but obviously November 25th really came down. They thought that was the best start date from a health and safety standpoint.
Just one more from me. Do you feel like basketball will get access to the same kind of testing that they're going to do for football?
I would think so. I haven't talked directly to anybody about that. I've just read the articles and the protocol, but I would think that would be that. But I also know that there can be, I don't think there's any hard protocols in there. There's so much change in what's going on in terms of the improvement of testing. Obviously things can change if you have a vaccine, but I think that's always evolving. So I think once we get to basketball and we start playing, I think some things can change. But if nothing changes, my guess would be that. My guess that it would be the same. And that's a tough one. The 21-day is something we really have to, understand, and your players have to understand. And we just got to continue to make, good social decisions, because it'll set you back more than 21 days if you have one player that has to sit out. Like, you take somebody that is out 21 days and then he comes back on day 22, his conditioning is not going to be very good, especially if he's someone of size. It's going to take, you're going to have a period. We've all seen that with just regular injuries. When guys come back, they're not the same guy for a while. It takes a little bit of time to adjust and get in shape and feel like their old self.
Andrew, go ahead.
Hey, Matt. I know the elephant in the room is the second semester when students return, but how confident are you in that November 25th start date with the testing protocols and whatnot?
Yeah, I definitely think we'll get started. I think there's going to be hiccups. I don't think there's a downside to anything that you decide. And in this situation, there just is, and there's risk in what you do, but there's also an assumed risk in what you did before. There was other situations and other things that you can get yourself into, in terms of injuries and medical conditions and things of that nature. So for us, it's just trying to keep on a daily basis making the right decisions and helping our guys and making sure they understand what our protocols are. But really it's, a daily thing. I know it's kind of simple, but it's wearing a mask and, staying away from, parties and going to bars and being around masses of people, and just continue to do those types of things. And, I think you're going to help yourself. But yeah, it's different as a coach because you normally go through a lot, and you played before you coached, you got recruited before you played, and you have a vast experience of doing the same things over and over. And now this is something that's new. So, you have to listen to the medical authorities and just make sure your guys are making good decisions. But, we're excited, we're excited about getting going, and we've practiced here for 5-on-5 for 2 weeks now. We've had 4 practices, and I don't know if we could beat anybody right now, but it's cool to get out there. But I think there's a lot of, we'd have a lot of games where we'd have to call a truce. That's just where we are right now. We're going to have to just keep working and get in shape and continue to get better, but also keep everything in perspective of what we're going through.
I know Jay Wright yesterday was asked about kind of the lifestyle and the points of emphasis he has to make to his teams. You mentioned parties, just what have you emphasized to your group? Like, are most of your players taking just Zoom classes, even though they're back on campus? Like, how has that affected what they do when they're not on the court?
Yeah, in terms of classes, it's just a mix. There's some guys that have all Zooms, or some guys that are, in a majority of going to class. There's guys that are half and half. And so it's just a mix. It depends on the individual. In terms of the social piece, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go to a party. Don't go to a bar. Don't go to a frat. Don't go to a sorority. Stay away from anything that has masses of people. And then we have protocols within our classrooms of, the social distancing. And so we feel comfortable about those guys attending classes because, we have it set up for them to be safe, in those environments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Noob, you got more?
Yeah, Matt, can you just kind of tell us your impressions of your team so far through a couple 5-on-5 practices? Does the unconventional nature of the offseason show up at all, or have things gone, relatively?
Our youth shows up. Our lack of experience shows up, and I think that's normal. We have 2 redshirt freshmen. We have 3 true freshmen. We have 2 walk-ons that are freshmen. So when you're trying to have a functional practice, I get caught in my years. 3 years ago when, we had 4 seniors, they ran practice. We just got back from Taiwan, and, that they ran practice. It was their 4th year. They just got done playing 10 games,
right.
And so then when you get to the next year, that year, 3 years ago, we could have 2 really good teams in practice. The next year, we win the league and we go to the Elite 8, but we did not have 2 good teams in practice for a long time. And then really our bench started to develop during Big Ten play, and they really made progress. And then last year we were searching to have 1 good team. We never got to that point to where we could grow I'm big. If you like followed my trends of when you feel comfortable with a group, you stay with the group and you grow with the group, especially a starting lineup. When you see me starting to change a lot, you have some inconsistent effort, you have some inconsistent production, and you got to go and try to find or push buttons to get it to where, you get a good 8-9 man rotation and you feel comfortable with who's starting. Doesn't mean they always finish games, but you got to get into some rhythm. You got to get into some pattern. And when coaches are searching a lot, doesn't mean you can't find it, but it's obviously a little bit harder because you want to, get concrete with that. So, but no, I like our team. I like our ability. We just have to make some strides here in September, October, and November. Like, this is going to be really, really important, not just for our team, but all teams. We went through a lot of things, but we're really young, and so we have no seniors. We really need those guys that are juniors to lead and to help us through that. But that's, it's so early, and we haven't went back-to-back days. We've done some things from a workout standpoint where we would go an hour a day or an hour and 20 minutes a day. And now we've practiced 4 times in 2 weeks. We've been going on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 2 hours apiece. So, and then next week we won't go back-to-back days either. So hours move up to 8. We'll go every day, but the Tuesdays and Thursdays will just be like 1 hour. We'll put in a lot of stuff. We'll put in a lot of offensive stuff. We'll kind of have walkthrough type stuff from an offense. Then we'll go live with that in terms of like 5-on-0. But then we'll practice for 2 hours Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Still trying to really ramp up gradually to help them from a conditioning standpoint. When I've heard anybody talk from a medical standpoint, they that is a real concern of the guys missing out on a lot of stuff and not having the normal summer and really getting to that physical conditioning, cardiovascular, stage to where, you're good. We don't want to put anybody at risk. And so hopefully when we can get to October 14th, and I've always liked what we changed. The women did it first, and then we followed them after they had a really successful fall. I think it was 5-6 years ago when we changed of practicing twice and then taking a day off, and then practicing 3 times, taking a day off, and kind of staying on a routine like that, even 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, and then just mixing it in right there. I think that's been really good for our guys and their bodies. And, we had such a, 10 to 15 years ago, it just seemed like there was just more of knees and stress fractures and things like that, and you had issues with it. And so sometimes the load level can get pretty high. And so you have to be smart about, going hard, but also being efficient and understanding your guys and understanding what they can and can't do. So I think we have a really, really good setup before this happened. But then I think our medical people across the board, Purdue, Big Ten, nationally, has done a good job of kind of letting us know what's in the best interest of your players. And, you're really going to have to do that. You see it a lot in other sports when they taper and they want to be great at a certain time of the year. And that's no different. But I think how you grow into that is a little different with the coronavirus.
All right. One other thing I want to ask you about, this is probably the most uncertainty you've had in your front court in a while. Can you kind of assess where you are both at the forward position with Aaron and Mason, and then behind Travion with the 2 young centers there?
Right. It's really going to be a battle for the 2 young guys. Manny's going to have a great opportunity to compete for playing time, and so is Zach. And both of those guys are making strides. And Zach is just takes up a lot of space, and getting him to play to his strengths. I think coaching Isaac Haas has really helped our staff, helped myself, because we gave him different rules at times. And, just trying to give him some basic rules, especially defensively, to help him. But he's had some good days, at 7'3", 290. He when he just gets big, he forces guys to score over him, and he makes it difficult on people. But he's had some tough days, but he's had some good days. And so just continue to kind of develop, him and Manny, and give him some confidence and get him to be simple. I think a lot of times guys, everybody, they want to do so much. Just keep things simple. Don't turn the basketball over, rebound the basketball, sprint, know what's going on offensively, stick to our rules on a defensive standpoint. And like, that seems so profound and easy, but you'd be surprised, guys, that, when they struggle, they simply just don't do what they're supposed to. And so just trying to set those ground rules, especially for our young guys. Mason has done a good job for us, bringing him along from a conditioning standpoint. He's had a little bit of trouble there. But I don't think it's anything major. I think it's just something we just got to monitor and, to kind of get his wind where he can play, more than, 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time. He plays very hard. He competes and he lays it on the line. And so I like that. I'd rather have a guy, be exhausted after 3 minutes because they gave you everything they had than a guy that's sitting there kind of going through the motions a little bit.
Right.
So he gives us that competitive spirit, and he can make threes. Just continue to work and improve in all areas. This is Aaron's, 4th year as a redshirt junior. And so, we need that experience, from him. And I think, when you struggle at one of your strengths, he's a good perimeter shooter, and he didn't have a good percentage last year. And I think it took away from other things, because I did think he improved defensively. I did think he improved rebounding the basketball and understanding what we were doing. So I think he's made some strides, and that's really kind of been camouflaged with his inability to make an open shot. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes you try to go do other things, and there's nothing wrong with it when it fits into your box. And I think he understands that now, is that, like, just play to his strengths, take your open ones, but find a way to get going, from a defensive standpoint, rebounding standpoint, sprinting standpoint, affect the game in other areas. So if that happens and you get into a game where your shot doesn't go, you're still putting a positive effect on the game. And but that's really where we are. I think Ethan Morton can find himself defensively as we could go small into guarding some fours, and having the ball in his hands, whether he's bringing it up the court or running plays to get it in his hands, very similar to Dakota, makes a lot of sense for us. He still has his moments where he turns the ball over, and a lot of good passers are that way. They see sometimes things that are developing and creating, especially with a new team, where you just haven't got onto the same page. But I think once he really absorbs everything that we do, like as we start to put stuff in, I think his value is going to go way up. And so it could be one of those things in a deep backcourt, to where, like, you have to have his playmaking ability, his passing ability. So I could foresee him getting in and getting some reps of guarding a 4. Not necessarily playing the 4 like it would look like that's the case, but it would just be 4 guards out on the court. So, that's not out of the realm of thinking, as we have a pretty deep backcourt, but also not an established backcourt. So I think Eric Hunter and Sasha had, a pretty good sophomore years. I thought they, from their freshman year of being a backups to starting and playing a lot for us, I think sometimes when you don't play as well as a team, sometimes some things get lost. And, I think that's something that gets lost a little bit, that Eric Hunter could be a really good defensive player for us. Could be a very good two-way player. Obviously, he's a good offensive player too. And, and Sasha just, playing, with experience, showing that he's an experienced player, and just taking what the defense gives him, and just being a threat at all time, but really getting more comfortable out on the court. Because he would have games where, he would just be really, really good. Then he would have games where you could see that, after a couple misses, that, he wasn't as confident. You got to stay with it.
Right.
You just got to take your shots and keep playing your game. And it's not just about shooting. So, like, don't get caught up in it. When you've played, I always say that when you've played, 75 college games, it should show. Like I told our guys the other day in practice, I said, if somebody came in here and sat down and watched us, they wouldn't know who the experienced players are and the inexperienced players. Because a lot of times when you start off a season, we have such a natural selfish piece to us where we just worry about ourselves. And you got to get lost in your team. You got to worry about your teammates. You got to be concerned with your teammates. And you got to try to help those guys. And it's hard when you're a freshman. You don't know what the hell you're doing. to think that way. But you shouldn't have that problem when you're older. And a lot of times these guys work on their games and they put a lot of time in. They have individual guys that they do this with. And the last time I checked, we're all going to get gauged on how we're productive as a whole. And, you got to start thinking that way right as practice starts. So I think every team has that natural piece to them where you start off that way and then you got to grow into a real team. And, that's where we are right now.
That answers my question. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Matt, thanks for doing this with all of us here.
No problem.
You touched a little while ago. You said your message to players, like if you want to go to this place or this gathering, don't do it.
Right.
How much is this season going to test cultures of teams? Because it seems like it might not just be the most talented team that might have the success this year. It's going to be who can deal with all this stuff and stick together and try to find a way to manage it all together.
Right, and that's my concern. Because like right now we haven't named captains. We named captains early last year and we don't have seniors. And so but anybody can be a leader, doing the right thing, off the, think about going to college. You should be allowed to go to a party. You know what I mean? You're in college. I mean, you should, now you got to be able to make the right decisions. And, but now you can't. Now that decision, you shouldn't, think along those lines man, this is unbelievable. I can't do this or what. No, any great team has to sacrifice. Any great team. And you might have to sacrifice because of your role for what's best for the team. You might have to sacrifice socially. But there's always going to be sacrifice, and everybody has to sacrifice. Coaches, players, everybody does. So that's really been our message. I think when it comes to a culture, everybody wants to win. Sometimes guys get caught up in how they win. They want to win, but they want to win, at the forefront of things. Everybody wants to play shortstop and lead off. That's just not the way it always rolls. And now you put this on an academic standpoint, you put this on a social standpoint and say, here's the protocol in terms of what you have to do academically to stay safe. Here's what you have to do from a social standpoint. And that's just, you can't, participate in that. You can't do those type of things. So I think culture is a little bit of it, but just the maturity of it, just the big picture of when you see people say, hey guys, we can't get in large groups and have parties. And all of a sudden you look on Twitter and you see just regular students doing it. And you're just okay, they're doing this. That's not going to be good for their school. That's not going to be good for them individually. That's not going to be good for the people around them. So you're not thinking about other people when you do that, and so it's a conscious choice to go do that because, the whole world's been a fool after the second drink. I think we could all agree with that. After that second drink, the whole world's a fool, but you've made a decision to go there before you got to that point, before you started drinking or before you started, engaging in something socially. So that's just thinking about yourself. That's just being immature and not understanding, what are we trying to accomplish here? I always tell our guys, the NCAA tournament's so important. And we get gauged on the NCAA tournament, but I always say, the Big Ten championship comes before that. Sometimes that gets lost. It's hey, just try to win the Big Ten. Don't worry about anything else. Try to win the Big Ten. They say, well, isn't the NCAA important? I go, well, you got to get there first. There's a bunch of teams that don't get there. We have to get in there. But if you try to win the Big Ten and you set your non-conference up to prepare you to win your conference, then, and that's not always about winning the most games. And you learn hard lessons, play quality teams, get challenged, get into neutral sites, get on the road. Some guys don't have any road teams on their non-conference schedule. You're well, you're going to play half your games in conference on the road. How are you preparing yourself? Now, if you lose those games, you'll be well, I did my best as a coach to prepare him. And but if, you don't do that, then you just really don't know how good you can be. Now you go win a couple, you say, oh, I don't need that. No, I would argue you would have won more. But I just think the more you get challenged, now when you get to that NCAA tournament, you've put yourself in a better position. And now you got a better chance. When that number is better, it doesn't guarantee anything. But you go look through the years and you go look at the higher number normally, except for a couple instances, normally advances more.
And I wonder for you as a coach going through the quarantine, the demands on your job are 24/7, 365. And I've talked to a number of coaches around the country that have had this chance to get a little bit of a break. And not that this is the circumstance you want to have that break, but you've had a chance to maybe catch your breath a little. And I know Brad Underwood's, changed his diet and has lost a whole bunch of weight, and different guys have done different things. What did the chance to get a break from the grind of college basketball do for you personally?
Yeah, like, you're obviously, you go through a lot in the season. There's such a relief at the end of the year. So I think that piece of it is like you go through a while where the uncertainty of it. I'm opposite of Brad. I bought a couple smokers and I gained weight. So like, you know what I mean? So we all find our happiness in different ways. So, but no, just, trying to kind of figure out, when does this start? What can I do? Like, what can I do to help our guys? What can, and you end up watching, reading more, watching more Netflix. And just kind of like, we went a while, we didn't do a whole lot. And you just kind of sat there and watched TV and read books and talked on the phone to, your peers and tried to, kind of figure things out. But no, it's been an unusual time to really say the least. But, we were able to get our guys back in the summer, which was a little different from other people. I think some people did, some people didn't. And then, we had some positive tests in the summer. And so like, we learned some hard lessons, and I think we've learned from those. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise, for us as a group, because it's like when you get recruited and you play, I know this is going to sound bad, but like guys just kind of have that thing, like you feel like you're talking to your own kids sometimes. Like they like kids tune out their mom and dad. And then somebody else will say the same thing to them, and they'll be like, hey, guess what? So-and-so told me this. I think this is really going to work for you. You'd be like, well, hey, man, I've told you that 100 times. But you don't listen to your dad because he's your dad. Or your coach, you get to be kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher sometimes. Like they just kind of just like tune you out. And so when we come in and we talk about our protocol and everything, we had some individuals that didn't stick with that. And, we had to learn a hard lesson, but then going forward, we've been really good. And they've understood that. So we've had a chance to spend some time with our guys. We've had a lot of Zoom, calls with them up to like now, to where you can be with them a little bit more. So it's like I said, it's been crazy. It's been unusual, but really just trying to make the best of it.
Do you feel more refreshed going into a season? I mean, after having not being on the road, traveling and recruiting and things like that.
Yeah, sure. No doubt you feel more refreshed. I get anxious when I don't know how things are set up. So that piece of me right now is like, so now we've gotten this figured out with some dates and now the schedule. And so now until we can kind of get to that point about, because I think once you can get your schedule set as a coach, you can start to build, your team and kind of understand, okay, here's who we play to start off with. Here now we can start watching some tape, starting to do some things, those type of things. That makes me feel better about it. But until I get into that point, I don't like the uncertainty.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Kevin, go ahead. Joe, we'll get you next.
Yeah, Coach. You alluded to the Big Ten earlier. I'm just curious about maybe an early gauge, particularly with the number of players coming back led by Luka Garza. Certainly it was a grind last year. What are your early thoughts about maybe the challenge of going in, particularly with a younger team, as you alluded to earlier in the call?
Yeah, it's good. You're going to get challenged, and obviously we're going to play some games, and we'll see how many games we end up playing conference-wise, like in December. And a lot of times, things can get set if you have early games, and like you can get yourself in a good position, or sometimes you can get yourself in a tough position. And sometimes how conference games get slated puts you in a tough spot. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is great. We get to go to, Iowa and Michigan State for our first two games. I appreciate that. And, or sometimes you can have some games where you have maybe, 4 games and 3 out of 4 is at home. Like, you think you would have balance, but sometimes with schedules and TVs and TV schedules, it could be a little bit different. But no, I think we're going to have a great league, and it's going to be exciting. It's always difficult to win, in the Big Ten. But I also think there's some breaks. You can get a break at the end of the game from like a call. You can get breaks by staying healthy. And now, that's going to be just the $1 million question is like, who can stay, in a situation where, they don't have to have, their best player out. Like if the testing gets to where it's a daily testing and no one else gets affected, and you're going to see some individual players jump out instead of a whole team getting quarantined. And so if like one guy steps out for 3 weeks and that's your best guy and you got to play 6 games in that 3 weeks, boy, that's going to be tough. Like that's a bad break. But if you're a team that has a chance to win the league and you're facing somebody else that does, and you got to play that team at that time, boy, you just got a break. So you're going to see a lot of those scenarios. And you're going to see, and in my opinion, I think you're going to see some teams that are going to have to quarantine themselves and miss a couple weeks. I just think that's probably bound to happen, and unless we can get to a vaccine or we can really get foolproof here with these testing. The one thing we can't get lost with is you still got to stick to the protocol. Like just because the daily testing comes into play, you still got to act a certain way. You still got to have great, behavior with your team and your staff and your support staff, because we've seen it with support staff or a manager, or, you see other people that, can come in and affect, other people. And so you got to be really smart, everybody in your program. But there's going to be a lot of differences across the board.
Kevin, anything else? Joe, go ahead.
So, Coach, I know Adam brought up recruiting a little bit. Has recruiting been difficult for you, or do you anticipate it being difficult in the future, just not being able to bring people onto campus?
I don't think it's difficult as much as it's different. I think that's probably the better word. And the one thing that it is like, coaches sometimes get worked up when things get to a disadvantage in their eyes. But I think it's been the same for everybody. So you just have to evaluate, through watching some film. You have to really work it. You have to, talk to a lot of people about kids anyways. And so you're doing your homework and trying to, understand their background and their makeup, and are they a great fit for your school and your staff and your system. So those things are still in play. I think you got to be a little bit more tedious in those areas. But, still trying to get the right fit for your team. But like I said earlier, it's the same for everybody. And so you just have to, you're living on a Zoom. And so like you're building relationships with people through a Zoom and talking to them on the phone and texting them. But you want to make sure your evaluation is right, and you want to make sure that you're getting somebody that fits at your school.
Mm-hmm. With having the guys together over the summer and then over the past 2 weeks practicing, has there been a level of uncertainty up until now of whether or not the season would happen at all? Was that something you guys were worried about at all?
It's something I think you're concerned with. I mean, I think that's very normal, but it's not something you communicate and talk really about. Like you just, I'm this way with our guys anyways. Just try to win the day. Like get organized the night before, know what's going on academically, basketball wise, take care of yourself, and just get ready to win the next day. Sometimes we worry about so many things. Doesn't mean you don't prepare for something 2 weeks away, because you do. But that's part of your list. Make your list. Make your list on what you have to do to get yourself ready the next day and going forward. And so, like for us, we don't discuss much of it. We normally have our guys over, and whether we cook out or we didn't have any of that. And so like that's part of we'll go bowling, or we spend time with our team, and we just didn't get that piece of it. I think that's a big part of it. You keep your guys out of your locker room for a big chunk of the time they've been here since June. And, those times while they're in the locker room and they're just hanging there playing video games, talking, watching film, doing whatever, that's great, because they're spending time together and they're just having fun and they're just being normal. And now when you take some of that away and guys are, in their apartment and they're on a Zoom and they're away from things, you're not going to grow as a team. And that's a big part of teams building, of just spending time, innocent time together, so you can build that trust.
So I know we've talked a lot about team dynamic and changing with a new team and a new group of guys. Has the lack of Nogel and Harms affected that in any major way, just a different dynamic and how the players are interacting?
Yeah, the lack of experience in practice. I think the efficiency of what you try to do to get things done in a practice is what we don't have as much of. I think that's the biggest effect. I think where we get affected the most from losing those two guys in particular is on the defensive end. They both are really good defensive players. And so I think that's so important. We run a lot of stuff, so we run a lot of offensive plays. And so, like, sometimes we've had groups where we were simple. We ran motion, and we didn't run a lot of plays. Since we've kind of had that infusion of big men, we've ran more plays. And then when the year you saw with Carson and Klein, we ran a lot of actions for shooters. And so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to put it in. It takes a lot of time to work, to get them to execute, to be detailed, just to have a well-oiled machine. And so when you lose guys that understand your system, that piece is difficult for a while. I think that'll be difficult for us just because, when people have experience of knowing what's going on, they're helping other people. When people are inexperienced and they have no idea what's going on, they just want to know to help themselves, but they're not helping anybody else because they don't know. How are they supposed to step up and say hey, you should do this or you should do that? They're going to be very, very quiet because they're just trying to figure it out themselves. So that piece right there is kind of where we are right now. And we just got to keep working and getting better and utilize the time. We're very fortunate because we have other teams across the country that aren't able to practice right now. They're not able to get out there right now because of COVID, and maybe there are restrictions or state restrictions or whatever that might be. And so we are. And so I think we have to be smart right here and just keep working and keep getting better each day and keep putting in that time. And I think at the end of the day, we'll be fine. But we're going to need older guys to play well and be productive and be consistent. And we're going to need younger guys to do the same thing. And I think some people would always say, you're going to need your younger guys, to really follow the lead of older guys. Well, it depends on who's going to play a lot. I don't know that, and so right now we have a lot of depth and we have a lot of competition, but we need to grow into people establishing themselves instead of everybody kind of being even. We don't have even talent. We don't have even athleticism, but right now from a production standpoint, that's kind of where you are when you start off a season. We need some guys to grow into where their production level is higher than others, so you can separate. Once you start to separate a little bit, now you can really start to build a team and really define roles. And that's a big part of coaching, is defining roles.
One more thing, if basketball follows the lead of football and has no fans at games, how will something like that affect the atmosphere at Mackey, a stadium that's
right? Well, I think it affects
notorious for how loud its fans can get.
Yeah, I think it affects it across the board. I think we have great venues in the Big Ten. Mackey is very loud, but, all the other places that we go to predominantly are loud too. And so I think it affects everybody. I think you're going to have to bring your own energy as a staff, as a program, obviously as a team. I think you're going to have the people on the bench or behind the bench or whatever the protocol is to have energy. I think the coaches are going to have energy. Sometimes you can be stoic and you can be as a coach to yourself, but I think you're going to have more to you as a coach. And I think the players are going to have to more, and it's not the fake hustle or the fake rah-rah. It's just, bringing energy, lifting each other up, because I think that's what a home crowd does for you. That gets the other team intimidated, but it lifts you up. And because I've always argued that, why can't noise on the road? Why can't you just think that's for you? And that's not human behavior, man. That's, deep down, that's not for you. That's against you. And at times you can let that feel you. And so it's the one thing about, how you feel, whether it's you're anxious or, you have fear or whatever, you can still do your job, and so I think that's where it sticks with do your job, be productive, know what you're doing, but bring that energy. So that's something in practice that we've really talked about, and we've done it to a degree. I don't think we've done it I don't think we've done a great job of it, but we just got to keep working at bringing our energy every day in practice. So when games come, that's our team. We have to, especially when things don't go our way, it's, normally teams that struggle get quiet. You got to try to keep that high energy level, especially when you're struggling, to help each other out and to get out of that rut. But I think it's a learned behavior. Sometimes you have guys that talk all the time, and you have some guys that are quiet. You, as a coach, you just don't settle and say, oh, okay, he's quiet. He doesn't have to talk on defense. No, no, that's, you have to talk at all times. And that's just something we just got to keep working on. That's a good question. Not to say your other ones weren't good questions too, but that's a real concern for a lot of people.
All right. Thank you.
Ryan.
You're welcome.
I'm probably one of those people. I have one last one for you, I promise. One of the things that kind of defined the whole football process was 5 power conferences and silos all kind of acting independently of one another. Can you just speak to the unity that was involved in the college basketball process in terms of the NCAA making this a 1 through 330 type of thing, and what that might mean for like universal testing standards and things like that?
Well, the testing is going to be really important. Does everybody have the resources that high major conferences have to test? I think that's going to be a concern, especially with scheduling, and I think that has to get squared away with everybody and their scheduling. And, I serve on a lot of those committees, and sometimes you don't have a lot of coaches on those committees. And so that's something that we need more of. We need more, coaches on some of those committees, in my opinion. But I think along the lines, I'm on the subcommittee for the one-time transfer, and I talk constantly like how this is really going to hurt college basketball if it gets voted through, but it's really going to hurt low to mid-major schools. Like a lot of times low to mid-major schools don't have representation at a higher level, say the Men's Basketball Oversight Committee. So I always think along those lines to say, how would this be for Eastern Illinois? How would this be for Southern Illinois? Because those were my 2 stops at those levels. And it's like, you have to make decisions that, that are best for everyone. And sometimes what's best for high major might be best for college basketball, but sometimes it might not. And, we just try to chew on a lot of things. So I think this is going to be really important. I think as we process things as it goes along, we set dates for college basketball, but no one's setting schedules. Like the conferences are going to set some things, and then we'll set our schedules after the conferences do things. So we still are living in some uncertainty right here, and how that affects certain schools in certain states is going to be different. How that affects certain schools at certain levels because of what they can and can't do. Some of that will be financial. Some of that will be, you want health and safety to be at the forefront, but then right as you get past the element of, okay, we feel safe with these decisions. Well, is it the best decision for us financially? And so, teams may be getting some games in and some bubbles, 5 to 6, 7 games at a lower level might be a smart thing, because now you get games, now you're safe, and now you don't have to spend as much money because I don't think the money is going to be there in the guarantee games as much. It just, if you obviously think about no
fans, right?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of guaranteed games that get played across the board, and there's no fans and there's no TV. There's a lot of other games that have the TV still. So I still think there's some revenue there for that, but it's going to be less. I don't think anybody thinks it's going to be the same, but you also have some legal issues there because you already have some contracts in play. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. But no, I could talk forever on it. I could talk forever on it. There's definitely, from my standpoint, you always think about what's best for college basketball. And I always think what's best, for Purdue, what's best for Big Ten, but what's best for high major, but also what's best for, for low to mid-major schools.
Thank you.
Your last ones.
Hi, Coach. Nice to make your acquaintance, first of all. I hope you and yours are doing well.
Doing great.
Good to know. I was just curious about, because so much of Big Ten basketball and college basketball is about developing chemistry and building on that chemistry throughout the year. How do you develop chemistry with so many new guys coming in, and on top of that, the fact that this is one of the craziest times to have sports in modern history?
Yeah, well, I think you just have to work through your adversity and practice. I think it's so important to set up, you teach the game in the whole, 5-on-5, and then you teach the game in the part, whether that's 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 1-on-0, 2-on-0. So you can do that through talking. You can do that through film. You can do that through competition. You can do that through breakdown, like I just mentioned. So a lot of what you do is the teaching piece of it, but there still has to be the competitive piece. Like you can do everything right, and if you don't compete, you can save it. You're not winning. You can do some things wrong, but if you play hard and you compete, so just trying to get them to understand where they have to be collectively with their competitive spirit, but also their knowledge. Knowledge is king. You have to know what you're doing. So we got to be great from a knowledge standpoint at our team game, but then each guy's got to be on their individual game that fits how we play as a team. And so you really have to work in teaching the part, but also teaching the whole. Then you have to, even before you're ready, like we're doing some 5-on-5 stuff now and we're not ready, but that's okay. Like we have to have some adversity. And when you have that adversity or you have that failure, you have to learn from it. Coaches really learn from their losses. You're like, hey, we got beat this way. There's no way I'm going to ever get beat by that team again that way. Well, if your talent's equal, you might do that. But if your talent isn't as equal and they have better players, then you're going to have to figure out something from a schematic standpoint that could give you an advantage to offset their talent. That's a real important aspect of just having a good gauge of where we are here. And I know I talk talent a little bit. Production's more important than talent, but talent's a good thing to lead to having more production. So it kind of plays on each other because you have to have it. But then we've all seen the most talented guy in the world not be very productive. Then you see some guy with very little athleticism just be a really productive college player. So you really just take all that in and then you just learn from it. And so when you have struggles, you watch film, you watch it with your guys, you learn from that. We do a lot of one-on-one. Our assistants do a lot of one-on-one film watching with guys. I like that better to start with because it really gets them in a constructive where they're not being called out in front of other people. So now they can digest it. They can take it in. There's no humiliation. Because I really don't get guys and get after them that way unless their effort's bad. If you're trying to do what we're asking you to do and you're playing hard and you fail, hey man, I'm your guy. I'm with you all the way. But if you're not even trying to do what we're asking you to do and you're going half speed and then I'm going to have a real problem with that. Like I'm going to call you out exactly when that happens. And we're going to get that corrected or we're going to find somebody else who wants to play. But I think we've done a good job of recruiting and finding guys that have a good competitive spirit and they want to win. And so I really like the group that we have because I think they fit that. But no, those are just kind of the areas that how you progress and how you teach, but also how you learn, especially when you have a young team.
Thank you. Also, a huge part about being a coach is obviously being a mentor to these really young kids. Like you said,
Right.
There's no seniors, and a lot of it is
Right.
trying to find out who the leaders are going to be.
Right.
In such a crazy time, socially, emotionally, mentally, what is the coach-mentor balance that you think is going to be really effective? Do you have to be a little bit more of a mentor sometimes, kind of an adult figure, mature figure, or do you think that focusing on basketball has been more helpful?
Well, I think anytime they have something from a health standpoint is to be really, really cautious and just hold them out. So that's what, like if somebody has, they hit their head the day before and they got a little bit of a headache, but yet it's not under our protocol for a concussion. They're like, oh, it's all right. Like in a normal situation, you'd be like, hey, let's get checked out. Let's let the doctors talk to you. Let the trainers talk to you and everything's fine. Now you even be more cautious than that. You might want to hold them out a little bit. So anything that's come up there, I think that's been really important for us as a staff to say, hey, let's pump the brakes. Let's be really, really cautious with something that's probably minor and sometimes even trivial, but you just don't know. There's still an element of uncertainty what we deal with in this health issue. There just is. And so like, that's what I think has been really important for us, and our trainer and our docs have done a really good job with our guys and our program. So I think that starts right there. If you're just honest with them to begin with, I think like, even when it's like a hard honesty, like, you're like, hey man, like this, you're late to class a couple of times. It's just unacceptable. Like, if you like push hard on some basic things that are really going to help them in life, they don't play hard or like whatever, just be honest with them. And like, but also be fair. Like you can get your point across without losing your mind. Like just be fair with them. And I think once you do those things and like you constantly, are trying to help them, off the court with their academics and coaching them, I think the coaching the coaching becomes a lot easier. Like they know you care. Like if they don't think you care about them, and guys are kind of fickle and funny that way. Like they'll act like they don't, like it's not a big deal. Like, but it's it's true. Like what human being doesn't want someone to care about them? Like, and so, but if you just care about them and, you know, give them time and just be honest with them, I think everything just kind of falls into place because, you know, I'm not in the business of taking bad basketball players. I mean, think about it. Like, you know, it's like if they weren't any good in basketball, they wouldn't be here. And so like, but if you're not going to be able to reach them, then they're not going to be able to play at a high level, or they're not going to be able to define their roles because, you know, why should they sacrifice for their team when, you know, they have a coach that, you know, doesn't care about them or lies to them, or like, you know, it just doesn't work that way. You know, it works when we're honest and straightforward. And I think when you do that, you know, you have a healthy team and, you know, you're able to, you know, achieve a lot as a group. But that's just kind of my way of doing things.
Awesome. Last question. The ACC coaches recently proposed that the NCAA tournament include all Division I men's basketball teams. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. That's kind of a crazy concept. I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of great ideas. I think their intent is really good because they want to see an NCAA tournament. And with everything going on, they want to see an NCAA tournament and everybody gets into it. I think on the opposite end of that is, can that work and be a functional model within TV and the March Madness? And I don't think that can be. I think that would be the issue. And I don't think it didn't sound like TV wanted to do that. And so I think that's they aren't just somebody at the table. They might be they're probably at the head of the table, you know. And so when you think of TV and everything that, you know, goes along with March Madness, you know, they're a big entity, and, you know, you can't go forward without them. They're the ones running it. And so I think that's where it comes to, is just, you know, we have a very manageable number that they're used to. And I think that's where it will stay, you know, along with that. But I understand the point of it. Like, and I understand the intent. The intent was very, you know, I think well taken by all coaches and all players. Like, yeah, like that would be great. The one argument that you would have is that it is a different time. And so, you know, and so like now, applying something that's going to be different. Like I understand that, but, you know, you have to earn your way in that tournament too. That's been one of the arguments I've heard other coaches talk about, is just that, like, you know, there's always 4 or 5 teams that probably earn their way into that tournament every single year that deserves to be in there, but there's got to be a cut line somewhere. And then we always argue like, hey, this team should have got in against that team. I think you're always going to have that, you know, and I think that's part of it. That's part of the brilliance of March Madness, is that, like, some teams do get left out that should be in there, but, you know, it's so close. It's really hard. You know, it's just really hard. But no, that's there's a lot of models out there that people, you know, really talked about, and especially with pushing it. You know, that would have been interesting to see, like a May Madness. You know, that would have been crazy. But like we've seen it now, like we have the NBA playoffs in September, and it's going to go into October. And so that's a little bit different, but they're making it happen. So, like, there could be some changes. There could be some things, and, you know, that pop up that could be a lot different than we're used to. But it looks like we're going in the right direction, and we'll have the same tournament as we've had in the past.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else have anything? We're hitting an hour here, so.
I got one quick one, if I can.
Go ahead.
With signing day, do you anticipate signing day staying in November? Are you part of those conversations at all?
Yeah, they moved it to it's dead until January 1st in terms of recruiting. But yeah, the early signing period will be the same.
Was there any push to move it, or can you even move that?
There was discussions, but they didn't discuss it a lot on the calls that I'm on. So,
thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Coach.
No problem.
Thanks, Chris.
You got it, guys.
Take care, Chris.
All right. See ya. See you, Andrew.
Bye now.